In this presentation, I'll discuss a literature review covering the utilization and effectiveness of personal counseling for genetic counseling graduate students. The first article I'll be discussing is called Why is Everyone So Anxious? An exploration of stress and anxiety in genetic counseling graduate students. It was published in the Journal of Genetic Counseling in 2011. I'd first like to define anxiety and the two specific types the paper discusses, state and trait anxiety. State anxiety involves subjective feelings of tension, apprehension, and worry, and activation of the autonomic nervous system, while trait anxiety involves relatively stable individual differences in anxiety proneness and the probability that state anxiety will be experienced in the future. The authors discuss in the introduction that anxiety is everywhere and that graduate school is a highly stressful environment. There are studies that link stress to depression, time management, and financial issues, among others. And graduate school can cause or intensify already present nervousness, with links to physical, psychological, and general fatigue, in addition to the other things listed here. Genetic counseling training can be especially stressful, as it requires extensive genetic knowledge, training to work through emotional situations with psychosocial assessment, clinical rotations and supervision, and a capstone project. So anxiety and stress in genetic counseling students is clearly something that needs to be addressed so that it will not affect our practice in clinic. The authors identify 5 goals for the study: identifying what the levels of state and trait anxiety are, relationships between demographics and state anxiety, the most challenging and rewarding parts of their graduate school experience, and advice that current students have for stress management for future students. The study recruited individuals at all of the ABGC genetic counseling programs through an email. They reached about 330 students through their program directors and received 225 survey results. Their survey consisted of 5 sections, including the following: demographic information, a 4-point scale of state trait anxiety inventory, time allocations and needs and wants for time, frequency and intensity of stressors on a 5-point scale, and rewards, challenges, and advice asked through open-ended questions. This study was piloted with a few students at their own research university. Data analysis included quantitative and qualitative analysis, including descriptive statistics and regression, as well as interpretive content analysis method in order to identify concepts and themes via coding. The results showed that most students spent their days sleeping, in class, clinical rotations, and studying. They indicated wanting more time for leisure and exercise, and needing more time for thesis work and homework. This shows that their wants were very personal and their needs were very academic related. Their mean state and trait anxiety scores were in the 80th percentile range, and these were higher than working female adults and medical students when compared to other studies. The quantitative statistics also showed that stressors included academic coursework, financial strain, and lack of recreation time. Factor analysis of stressors included professional uncertainty, personal life events, interpersonal demands, academic demands, and isolating circumstances. Qualitative analysis showed that the rewarding experiences were academic, interpersonal interactions, and career personal affirmations. The most challenging experiences included academic professional demands, interpersonal and intrapersonal interactions, finances, and isolation. Advice for stress management included practicing self-care, managing responsibilities, and seeking support, among others. In discussion of the results, the authors identified very high state and trait anxiety levels in this population, and wonder if genetic counseling programs may be attracting students with stronger tendencies to become anxious in comparison to other working adult females, but noted that most seem to have clinical levels of trait anxiety. Rewarding aspects were seen as generally positive, and students enjoyed content of their classes, the people they work with, and the field in general. Challenging aspects showed a very heavy workload and a need for time management. Their advice included self-care, although only 8 students suggested seeking professional support. Limitations of this study included that it was a non-random sample, and the timing of the sample could have influenced the results, and that there are variations in program curriculum and stress levels across the year. Also, their measurement of stress was only based on frequency ratings. The implications of this is that time management and organization are crucial in this program, and that counseling center workshops could be helpful, as well as other formal counseling services such as a support group. Additionally, in further research, interviews could elicit more information, as well as longitudinal studies. And high anxiety and stress could be carried into these students' careers, and management and self-care are very important. The second article I'm going to discuss is Predictors of Psychological Help Seeking in Clinical and Counseling Psychology Graduate Students. So looking at a different population, but similar in their help seeking and use of therapy. It was published in 2005. The authors discuss that counselors are not invulnerable to mental health issues, including depression. Therapy can help those working in these difficult service provider fields, as well as those that are training for them. And 4 major barriers to help seeking and therapy use are availability, accessibility, acceptability, and affordability. And that many current psychotherapists and students may have issues with confidentiality, exposure, and judgment if they seek personal help, and make them wonder about the appropriateness for their career. The purpose of this study was to investigate help-seeking views and habits, predictors of help seeking, and look at relationships between attitudes and actual behaviors, as well as faculty attitudes and how that affected student help seeking. Their hypotheses showed that favorable attitudes could lead to therapy seeking, and higher obstacles could lead to less help seeking. They reached out to the American Psychological Association through email with their survey and reached 342 responses. Their survey covered 5 areas that are shown here. Results showed that most participants were seeking a PhD or PsyD, and 54% were in therapy during school, while 70% had been in therapy prior to or during graduate school. The highest potential obstacles were cost, time, and confidentiality, and help-seeking attitudes were generally favorable and thought of as important in training. Perceived faculty attitudes were seen as mildly positive. When the authors looked at relationships, they discussed relationships between attitudes and help-seeking as being a positive one, which supports their hypothesis, and that there was also positive endorsement of this practice in training. There was a relationship between obstacles and help-seeking, but time was not related, and those who rated cost and confidentiality highly were more likely to seek help. They found that possibly those who need and use therapy were more likely to endorse concerns about barriers than those who didn't need it or use it. There was also a positive correlation with positive attitudes of faculty and help-seeking, and predictors of help-seeking included the fact that they saw it as integral to training, positive attitudes, and confidentiality. Limitations included it being a cross-sectional design, retrospective, and participation in therapy could lead to more positive attitudes. Implications were that finding healthy ways to care for self in training could lead to better habits in their career, and that faculty attitudes could have a big impact on student attitudes. Opportunities for therapy should be made available, and there could be a professional benefit to therapy, although cost can be a major barrier. We've seen from these studies that clinical graduate students experience a lot of stress and anxiety, and that they could have a negative impact on their careers. There's especially a lot of stress and anxiety in genetic counseling students, and I'd like to investigate how it's being managed. Is there use in recommending or requiring personal counseling for stress management, professional development as the client, and habits for the future. My research design includes receiving UNCG IRB approval, distributing the online survey to current first and second year students of a qualitative and quantitative question survey, and asking questions regarding attitudes about personal counseling, utilization and helpfulness of personal counseling, and strategies for self-care and prevention of negative things later in career. The relevance and long-term goal would be to elicit helpful information for directors, upcoming programs, and current students facing stress and anxiety.